We do have a lot of panelists up here. We also have a good audience, and I want to make this interactive because we're after lunch.
The biggest challenge as of today is funding.
Great. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Anand. I'm Shiva Devareddy, founder of GoCorp. GoCorp is the first social marketplace for weavers and artisans in India. Friends, as you know, there are more than 9 million weavers and artisans in India. Most of them don't even make basic minimum wage, while the same products are being sold in Western markets and European markets. Today we are at 35 clusters in India across 6 states. India has more than 1,000 clusters. So we have challenges in terms of growth, both on the supply side. We are ambitious in terms of reaching out to more than 100 clusters. And on the buy side, we need to see how we can work with a large number of buyers, international buyers, and bring business to these artisans in India. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I'll start with a small question. How many of you think garbage or waste is a crisis in India? Oh, I love it when most of the audience is from Bangalore or Bombay. Most of the hands go up. Nice. I come from Hyderabad. I'm Roshan Miranda representing Waste Ventures India. We work on management of waste. The core idea here is to avert dumping of waste, almost 90% of the waste being dumped into dump sites. Now, we work mostly with bulk producers of waste, who produce almost 40% of urban waste. These are housing societies, academic institutions, big corporate campuses, manufacturing plants, and so on. And we provide them a total waste management solution. It could be organic waste, which is wet waste in common terms, or recyclable waste. We do this in an inclusive manner. We also work, one of the bulk producers we work with, although they're one step removed from the actual producer, is waste pickers. We work with them extensively to enhance their livelihood as well, and I'm happy to talk about it in detail. But going back to what are our challenges, I think it also addresses where we are headed. Today, waste management is completely government supported and grafted in. We want to take that and build a model that is self-sustaining. And what is our challenge? One of the major challenges that we face is policy and advocacy. Today, a contractor is paid on a per ton basis for him to take the waste from the producer space and go and dump it in the dump sites. It's a perverse incentive. This guy will never allow for any management to happen. We want that system to change, and we want an active, proactive involvement from the government to bring in policies which not only address the waste situation, but also bring in a lot of entrepreneurs like me and the entrepreneurs who we want to encourage and be in this space. I'm happy to answer any of the questions.
I'm Ram. I'm from Fora Recycling. We do 3 things. One which currently Roshan is not handling. We handle electrical and electronic waste of all kinds. Our simple definition is that if it's got a plug, if it runs on batteries, and if your device has a wheelie bin logo crossed out, it's to be responsibly recycled. And we do that. We've been here for about 4 years. And over the last 2.5 years since we have established our facility, we do 3 things. We are authorized Microsoft refurbishers, so which means that we provide licenses to refurbish systems across the country. And we do end-to-end recycling, which means we do dismantling, segregation, granulation, stripping, all the way up to working on chemistries for metal extraction. And the third part is that our social intervention, where we work not with rap pickers, but slightly above the next level, the kabadiolas, but in a slightly different way than what people are doing right now. We are not choosing. We are not choosers there that we pick only electrical waste or electronic waste from them. We pick everything. We're kind of veering them away from the informal sector supply chain towards a formal chain. And that comes the problem. Our challenges are 2 in this. One is we believe that when we, and by the way, India's got the highest recycling rate in the world. We recycle everything. I mean, we are probably one of the highest recyclers in the world. We recycle starting from small papers to plastics to all the way right up the value chain. Because I keep repeating to people whenever people ask me, we can compete with businesses. We can't compete with livelihood. We are actually speaking, whenever any management, waste management enterprise gets set up, we are actually kind of trying to get into somebody's livelihood. As long as actually they are part of we believe that they're part of the solution, we can't do anything. Our fundamental belief is that we are able to turn them around from just being in the informal sector to the formal sector by changing the way they behave. And ultimately my challenge is all of us to believe there is responsible recycling around. So when you recycle stuff, ensure that actually it's responsibly recycled, not just given away to a rat picker or a kabadiola. And one obviously is scale and growth. but that's a different problem we can talk about.
Hi, I'm Mihir Shah, UV Life Sciences. What excites me the most is to be able to leverage technology to address a health disparity. And the area that I chose was cancer, and in particularly breast cancer. We'll discuss more about us a little later.
Thank you, Mihir. Hi, I'm Lata Srinivasan from Chipper State Education. We help children, to just put it in a nutshell, we help children read and understand English better. As you all would have known, we have read in the papers that many college graduates often leave their education or with very little or dysfunctional English skills. So this makes them not be able to read or understand English the way it is expected for them to be employable. So we actually go down where they start learning the language. So we deal with children, especially in the tier 2, tier 3 schools, especially which we call the affordable private schools. And we help them right from the way they start the alphabet to decoding, to developing their fluency and finally comprehension. Most of these affordable private schools, they are English medium schools because parents want their children. It's an aspirational in India. So we have children who read all the core subjects like math, science, everything in English. And when the basic comprehension is not there, then there's no meaning in what they read. And it's often comes as a shock when we actually talk to children who are in grade 8 or grade 9 who are almost completing their school education and they can't even read or comprehend what they are even in their own textbooks, and we do not know what kind of exams they pass. And with respect to the problems that we face, our problems are more of scale. We have had schools ask us to send our own teachers, and that's where we have a challenge because getting local talent which is good in English is not very easy. And the way we offer a solution is through technology, which is basically for scale. We also say that teachers cannot be replaced in a classroom. So we enable the teacher in the classroom with technology so he or she can take the content forward. And we also assess our impact using assessment methods. We have 2 levels of assessment, baseline and inline, for most schools. And we work primarily with private schools, but we work with government schools through NGOs. Thank you.
My name is Pavin. I'm representing Aquasatin. What we do is we manufacture water purification machinery which delivers clean drinking water for rural communities. A typical 1,000 liter per hour machinery can serve around 1,000 households in a village. The USP of our machinery is that it can be remotely monitored and it is completely automated. Automated means that it doesn't require one full-time operator to run this machinery. The major problem with rural infrastructure is that is about the poor maintenance, and within a few years they go defense, and this is mainly because of a high overhead cost and which happens. So what we are trying to do is move a people-dependent and water treatment system to use more of technology, which helps in bringing down the cost of operation and thus helps in achieving sustainability faster. Today, we are operating around 150 water stores across Karnataka and thus serving around 150,000 people with clean drinking water every day. We are a bootstrapped organization, and I think maybe one of few in this sector who have been able to make profit for the last 2 years. The major obstacle which we see in the present model is that it's highly dependent on the purchase cycle of the partner organization like NGOs, whereas we see a lot of potential as a lot of demand and for clean drinking water stores in the village. So we are working on a hybrid model where we can directly partner with panchayat in the future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for those very clear and brief introductions, which leaves plenty of time for some audience conversation. I'm going to ask one question to get the panel warmed up, and then we'll look for a question from the audience next. And I want to start with a question. We're at a development dialogue, and many people here are from the NGO sector. In fact, I'd like to ask for a show of hands, if you're from the NGO sector, raise your hand. And if you represent government, raise your hand. Not so much. And how about for-profit sector? Wow, nice balance. Okay, so balance is exactly the question I want to throw out to 2 or 3 people to answer here. Not everybody, but the question of how do you think about the balance between profit and impact? This is a hard question for everybody, but this and your investors care, your employees care, you care. So, Rohan, maybe you can start.
Sure. In my opinion, I think, so to give a little bit of what we do, when we started recycling initiative 5 months ago in Hyderabad, we wanted to go and identify a material that was being dumped in the dump sites, that was not recycled, so that we could monetize it and start recycling of it, which essentially averts, dumping of this material and averts so many tons of material being dumped. Plus, also monetization helps waste pickers, earn that extra income, which provides them a better livelihood. Now, when we started it, it was a challenge, but then there were a few decisions involved, and I think that's where probably it's apparent to it's probably required to discuss how the decision making happens. We took this business up, but we knew that until we go to a certain scale, we are not going to be making any profits here. But for every kg of Tetra Pak material that we picked up, we were paying 5 rupees to waste pickers. And mind you, 90% of our collection happens from waste pickers, and we are the only aggregator, so there is no middleman in between, which takes away the value from the waste pickers. So we directly deal with the waste pickers and provide them the maximum value that they can get from this material. So now when we started this, it was a dilemma for us to cross, because it was taking us multiple months to break even in that business line, but we had to start it because we were impacting the livelihoods of the waste picker. Now, what I feel is it need not be mutually exclusive, because I know that at the scale we are growing and at the scale we will attain in next 2 months, we will be breaking even in that business line. But now, was a few months or few years, where do you draw that line? Is probably something that an entrepreneur asks himself. Do I want to be profitable in next 3 months, or do I want to be profitable in next 3 years, right? And what determines that for me or for any entrepreneur is that, do you have enough diversification in your business line which can provide you income from other business lines that you have? For example, is there a cash cow that you can probably tap into? Maybe recycling of some other material, or finding a partnership with a big company so that you can handle all their paper products. For example, we ended up having a partnership with ITC. That gave us enough of profits that we could pump into this business line. Hence, we could see that if not in 3 months, it's okay. If we are attaining that profit in 8 months, it's fine, because we'll take it out. We have something else providing us income.
Good.
That balance is probably critical.
So it's all about striking a balance. Dr. Nand, you have some thoughts on this too.
So my background is basically in the non-profit sector. I work with the UN, I work with NGOs. So this is the first time I got into the private sector. And I got into the private sector because of a certain amount of frustration I felt working in the NGO sector, right? I simply, when we use the word NGO, not governmental, not profit, very difficult to define what are we for. We are not something, we are not something. And then we say for profit. So I feel this line itself in these sectors which are impact, health, education, waste, is completely an artificial line. We all need to be for value organizations. There is no non-profit, for-profit, non-governmental. We need to create nothing with the word non in it. It's a negative word. We need for-value organization. The ultimate test for a for-profit, and I am a loss-making company, the ultimate test is the market test. And I have failed till this point. I have created a business model. The business model lines are generating profit, but the overhead that is required is always something that you don't know at what scale you will manage it. But the objective is to create a model which can stand the test of the market. But at the same time, when you ask this question, how do you balance? I think this is inherent in the DNA of the companies. We don't need to really make efforts to try and see how to balance. Once it is inherent in the DNA of the company, I am a primary healthcare provider. There is no way that I will not create impact. It is ingrained in the DNA of my company, whether I stay or somebody else runs this company. And therefore, I should continuously focus on how the market is going, how I'm going to answer test for the market, and keep trying it.
Great, thank you. One last comment, yeah.
So the first thing in any guy who does a for-profit and social, the first thing is that above the money comes the passion. I mean, we have to have a passion to do something. If the passion is missing, any amount of money is going to go down the drain.
If you're here in Hubli, you're representative of that passion already, right?
I've been part of the Deshpande Foundation, so it's okay.
Good. Shiva, you have a point?
Yeah, just a quick one, Will. So the way I look at it is there is a problem and always an opportunity. Like in our case, the opportunity is the craft market is huge, right? I mean, global craft market is estimated to be around $300 billion. Even in India, it's around $5-6 billion, right? But the problem is that the markets are not equitable. The producer is not even getting minimum wage in most cases. But the value of the product is there. There is a particular value, there is a particular market that this product goes to. So for social enterprises, the solution that we build should be taking into account the opportunities and the problem. That is what makes a social enterprise. If you are just trying to build a business out of craft, there are hundreds of craft organizations today selling craft products. But I wouldn't call all of them as social enterprises. I mean, it's debatable. But if you are able to make sure that the producer is getting a fair price and there is equity in the markets, I think if you can make the markets more equitable, then I think you are solving the problem.
Great. So let's go to the audience here. Do we have any questions in the audience? I see a hand down there.
Okay, so I'm Soumya. I work with an organization called Samunati. We provide agri-value chain financing. My question is open to the panel. There has been a lot of talk about impact, and social business, as you know, is diverse. So how are you as an organization measuring impact? Because according to me, reaching 1,000 lives is different from impacting 1,000 lives. So what metrics would you use to actually measure impact?
So that's a great question. Let's hear from people who have not spoken so far. Lata, you want to start? And what I heard in the question there, the key point is it's not just breadth or number of impact, but also depth of impact. And how do you think about that?
Yeah. So in education, we have a little tricky situation here because education has got a long gestation period. And because we deal with very young children, it's also that education or whatever the learning that they have is continuous and not discrete at various points in time. Which is why when we do the measurements as a baseline at the beginning of the academic year when children do come in, we have a measurement which is based on the grade levels. And towards the end when we do the measurement, when they come back the following academic year, it is not where they have left off. It is what we call the slide that we do have. But we do have a measurement, which is why we do tell schools whom we work with that the measurement has to be done even before the children break for the holidays or even before the exams. But in our industry, it is a problem because most of the time, especially in the second term, when the classes are broken up because of multiple reasons, children do not get the learning which has to be continuous for them to see any impact. So I think it is sector specific, it depends on the age group that we work with. So, but we have seen the maximum impact when children come continuously, maybe for a month, and that's when we are able to move them up to the next level.
Great. Mihir, you have a comment?
Yeah, in our case, it's quite straightforward. The number of people collecting water from our water stores, and they pay for the water. And people pay for water when they see a value in that thing, and an efficacy better than what they have. So which is quite straightforward. That the more the number of people collecting water from a water store is the greater the impact which we are creating.
But Paul, let me challenge you, right? So rich people pay for water, and that has no impact on their life other than it makes them not thirsty. Right, but your customers are different, right? They're not getting poisoned when they drink your water.
Yes.
So there's a little different thinking about the measurement there.
Yeah, if you see, our plants are in the rural areas, and it's not in the urban areas, and we do other metrics of what's the percentage of people in the village collecting water. Is it 10% or 30% of the water, and who are these people who are collecting water?
Yeah, so if you're converting people from being drinkers of mineral contaminated water to clean water, then on a percentage basis, that's truly a measure of impact in that village. Even more so the number of liters that you sell. Yeah. Great. Mihir, you have a comment on impact?
Ours is a bit hard to track, but a very clear metric for what would count as impact, which is the number of life years saved due to an early detection of breast cancer of an underprivileged woman. So I could provide a private service with Metropolis or SRL for an affording woman, and that goes towards impact too, but it's not pure impact. Pure impact would be a woman who was not going to get a breast exam ever in her lifetime, who we touched upon, and that's first level impact. We identified some of them with an early stage of breast cancer, and then they were operated, they were offered the treatment,
and the outcomes were that they survived. And their survival would be longer because we know that they were detected at an early stage, and so we can then take a measurement on life years saved, which is pure impact.
That's a great example.
Hard to track, but we know exactly what impact means.
And just to add a little philosophy to it, I have a very simple statement. If it can be done in a for-profit model, it must be done that way. Because if you want to maximize impact, as long as it's done with a conscience and with some view of society and sustainability involved, if you can do it for profit, you must do it that way if you truly want to maximize the impact on the population on a local, national, or global basis.
Well, somebody had said at Davos from Mumbai, there was a live telecast to Davos, and this guy said, and I'm quoting, he said there is enterprise and there is anti-social enterprise. There is nothing like social enterprise because that's built into the definition of an enterprise. You have to be socially aware. Some of us are more inclined than others.
The United States financial services companies were anti-social enterprise in 2008, but
both of us deal in plastics of different kinds. Plastic, by definition, is obviously recyclable. It also kind of goes back to the end, and Roshan can add to this, but it actually leads back to us as consumers as to how do we deal with it. I mean, there is one particular slogan, if you go to the Pollution Control Board office, there are two slogans there and two kind of things there, right? And I've seen it in Bangalore. There is a plastic association which says, save trees, use plastic. There's another banner right next to it. There's an environment guy says, use less plastic, save trees. Now, both are in the same office right next to each other and I have a photograph of it. Now the thing here is that how responsible are we towards these two items? Now, having said that, there are recycling organizations and recycling enterprises who are trying to do this, but it all comes back to us actually as to how we dispose of them. Now if we actually kind of dump it in the garbage, it goes to rat pickers and it ends up in all probabilities with the informal way of doing things of burning and everything else. Some of it lands up with ocean. The same thing happens in electrical and electronics. If you give it to the kabadiwala without ensuring that he in turn works with a formal enterprise, it'll again go to the informal sector where they will burn it. Now it's all question coming back to us actually as to how we are dealing with it as a consumer, not exactly as that what an enterprise does it with it when he actually get it. Our biggest challenge for a question that I didn't answer earlier is our supply chain. And if you see the inverted pyramid of waste generators, we at the bottom of the pyramid are the largest generators. Maybe the Infosys and IBMs around the world, they generate tons and tons of electronic waste. But if you were to kind of assume that guy works in Infosys office and has got 2 computers at home, he's a larger waste generators on a unit measurement than anyone else. So we are the highest waste generators here, and how we treat our waste is kind of will translate as to how it gets recycled at the other end.
So I have a question I want to ask, because I saw the audience is half for-profit, and we established that you guys are all for-profit up here. But I know that some of you employ some unique business models that involve using hybrid non-profit and for-profit action, NGO and for-profit. And we can take the non out of there, but it's just the way it is for now. Maybe, Mihir, could you talk about how you've coupled these two to maximize your ability to grow the business and have impact using a combination of donation capital and for-profit capital together?
Right. So our customers are of very varied nature. Some of them want to induce early detection in the society or some part of the community. And some of them want to provide a service in that part of the society. And we do that by a couple different ways. One is that if a foundation or an NGO or a CSR fund wants to cause early detection to happen in a certain region or community, we work through our NGO partnerships, and we are in the process of forming our own NGO, which will provide a service by purchasing machinery and training from the for-profit company. So the transaction involves us, and we are part of the economic equation, but we make sure that their end goals are preserved as they're making this philanthropic investment. On the other side, when we partner with Metropolis or SRL or diagnostics chains or hospitals who wants to provide a for-profit service, they directly transact with us like anywhere else, and we provide a service or a product. So we have a combination way of dealing with all sorts of customers between these two, right from the government and all the social service bodies in between, to the profit-generating customers.
Great. Lata, I think you said you employ some similar tactics. Can you talk about it?
Yeah. So we have only one kind of customer, which is every customer pays. It's only the quantum of the money that is getting paid that only differs. So when we work with schools, schools pay us per child. So that's a very, very nominal amount. But we also work with NGOs who in turn work with the underprivileged group, who in turn work with the government schools, and those the beneficiaries do not pay, but the NGO pays us. And in the similar way, we also work with CSRs of organizations through their foundations, where again they pay us when we actually work with children.
Actually out fundraising right now, raising a $50 million fund, half in India, half overseas. And they want to say, where are the exits going to come from? How are we going to give a return to our investors? And ultimately, that means anybody I've invested in, and we've invested in 3 of the companies here, has to be able to achieve follow-on growth capital rounds. And we actually typically reinvest, as many other early stage investors do. So we're in the seed series, somebody else comes on for A, we'll then contribute to A, somebody comes on for B, we'll either contribute to B, or we will maybe sell some of our shares, or even all of our shares, on that 3rd round of funding, and maybe on the 4th round of funding, we would sell all of our shares. That would be a typical model in the venture funding progression. Now, also other things that happen, we have one company where a global strategic investor is interested in buying all of the company now, even soon after a seed round. And we're considering whether we would sell all of our shares to this global strategic. But those are all, in many cases, not easy to come by. We've had one partial exit. We've got a couple more coming along. Other impact funds have had a number of exits, and many of them come from private equity investors that buy the entire company and then grow it and then resell it again later. So that's what you'd see is secondary sales to other financial investors, or sales in the entirety to a strategic investor, buyer, or a private equity company. That's where exits come. All that said, that's in the world of venture. And there's another form of financing which does not get used enough, which is called revenue or royalty-based financing. It's hard for us to do as international investors because you're not allowed to bring debt into this country, or easily. You can, but it's very expensive. But there's many other markets where debt-based funding, where the debt gets paid back as a percentage of revenue, so it's basically a self-liquidating investment. That's in fact a very good form of investing in impact companies that may not have the benefit of a private equity investor or a follow-on a financial investor to take create the liquidity for the original investors. So it's in fact probably the most important question to ask in any investment scenario, which is how are you going to get your money back for your investors? And it gets asked both of the portfolio CEOs that we have, but also of ourselves as investors and fiduciaries of our limited partners' money. Thank you for that question. Other questions for our panelists here? Down in the front, please. Oh, here we go, Mike.
Are we on here?
So I urge you women to get your thinking caps on and go with the question.
I also have a female colleague, and I can whisper in her ear for her to ask. If that's
I'm actually smart enough to do that on her own, but go ahead.
I have a question about impact, and it may be slightly nuanced on the first question, but it's about measurement versus attribution. So how do we measure things is a lot to do with outcome often, but how do we actually attribute changes in a social system to some global or complex metric to the work that we're doing? And I'm curious if any of you would like to share some of the challenges that you've had or successes with attributing the work that you're doing to the changes within the metrics that many organizations are hoping to move.
Raise your hand. We do. One. Wow. Okay. Then we've got some work to do. Those of us in the for-profit world. I should publish your impact. I can publish yours. I can publish yours. Okay. So talk about attribution. How can you take? What I'm hearing is how do you take credit for the ultimate impact that's claimed?
Inherently changing the standard of diagnosis or standard of care, and by getting several other stakeholders to think about early detection of breast cancer, maybe not necessarily through our technology, through our equipment, but actually take it up, would be a way to attribute towards the overall goal. The other goal is survival. So you attribute impact towards survival. And so that's why I said the quality of the number of life years saved is actually an attributed factor towards how meaningful the impact was. For us in a developing country and world environment, it sometimes gets difficult as we are learning because epidemiology is not measured really well. Without us doing anything so far, India doesn't really know what its per capita incidence rate of any given cancer is. They have a number of registries and they try and draw a parallel for the whole country based on those registries. So one of the things that we want to do is actually not only detect the cancer, but also create a live mobile registry of cancer. And this is the other thing that we are picking up as we move forward. And actually our for-profit investors, our venture capital investors are pretty excited about that fact. So it was interesting to see that what made us think about this was impact-driven metrics that United started asking us about. And we thought of this mobile cancer registry. And then when we discussed it with our potential investors, they said, that sounds like an awesome idea. So it's interesting.
Good. Shiva, you talk about trying to have fair wages go to your supply chain. But can you attribute the work you're doing to actually truly increasing the wages and livelihoods? I mean, how do you actually follow that line all the way through?
Yeah, good point, Will. It's actually quite difficult to have the complete transparency in the supply chain, and that's where I think the model is very important. So we usually work with smaller cooperatives where we can actually also ask them what is the wage that they are actually paying to the particular weaver who is working on our order. So the costing sheets that we develop actually have a wage component, and then we can actually look at the wage that they are usually getting paid versus the wage that they would get paid if they're working on our order. So we can attribute the increase in wage directly to the orders that we give. And I think, that's one of the important things that we want to do.
This question is for Mihir. I'm Samidha. We have a software company. We develop software for gynecologists which connects gynecologists to the women in India. This question is based on the breast cancer. What we have realized in our study is that breast cancer has been in developed countries, people are getting more and more aware, and mammograms or pap smears which are helping with cervical cancer, awareness is much more. Compared to what we have in India, I don't think when people go to a gynecologist or even for a regular doctor, a doctor is checking regularly with a patient whether you have done your mammogram, when was the last time you did it, or when did the last time you did a pap smear. So I want to understand that how would you bring the awareness to the people, because you're directly dealing with customers which are the women.
Yes. We launched a website, and you're all welcome to visit it. It's called thelovecurve.in, thelovecurve.in. And the Love Curve is an awareness and education website. It informs women why they should check themselves in the first place. What are the benefits of it, and what are potential harms if you don't? When we speak with the National Health Mission offices of the government, we are not pitching that you buy X number of machines from us. Rather, we talk about a program called SEVA, which stands for Screening, Education, Wellness, and Awareness. And we are ensuring that we provide that program and not just a machine, so as to ensure that it's a comprehensive nature approach, which has been internationally been recommended by multiple agencies, including WHO IRC office, ICMR ICPO, which is India's prevention oncology advisory body, and an organization called Breast Health Global Initiative. So everybody knows that awareness and education is an important part of secondary prevention, and we are quite aware of that fact as well. I think the admission to screening increases if there is awareness in that region. So we actually provide this breast-shaped silicone models with tiny tumors hidden inside, and women in the waiting area play a little game of trying to find this tumor in this model breast, thereby gamifying the concept, taking the taboos away from it, but also educating them on how can you do self-breast exam. So it's fundamentally a part of our approach.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions from the audience, and then Naran just told me he's got a hard question to throw at us. So, one in the front here.
Yeah, this is an open question.
And one over there.
This is an open question. In the previous discussion that happened, the founder of NextGen said that you can't play it both ways. You either are a for-profit company or you're a non-profit company or an organization. If you try to check both the boxes, you end up being good in neither. Okay, this is something that she shared, and he's from a for-profit organization. My view is, having worked in corporate for about 20 years and now having switched to non-profit over the last 3 years, I can clearly kind of see where this will take all these young people, successful people right now. As you scale, investors come in, they come with demands, they come with, you have boards and you have policies and you have policies. You just can't work the way you are working right now, right? They are going to be pulling the strings. So how do you plan to address that? That's my first question, and a slightly related question. As you scale, isn't there a real danger that you are trying to fill a gap which actually the government should be in the garbage? Most of the Western countries, through partnerships, through vendors, the government takes care of it. Health, typically the government takes care of it with some private organization. Are we, because we are so successful, actually dissuading the government from actually doing its basic job?
All right, so that could be actually an entire hour discussion to answer both those questions, which are excellent questions. I'm going to try to get some short answers. I'm going to start with Pavan thinking about the first one, which is, are you getting in the way of the government doing its job? Because, boy, it does a great job giving fresh, clean, safe water to people in India, doesn't it? So tell me, how much are you getting in the government's way?
No, I don't think we are, taking away the government job. What we see ourselves is supplementing what the government is doing, and taking it to the last step of making it clean drinking water to the people. If you see the human daily requirement of drinking water is more than 2 to 3 liters. It's like 170 liters of water. So, even when we are there, we just take care of the drinking water requirement, or even we can add the cooking water requirement. But then there is still the remaining 150, 160 liters of water which you daily require, which is still the government needs to come in. And what I see is that, like in the Indian scenario, where the drinking water is part of one of the activities which the local panchayat has to take care of. And if we just leave it to there, where there's a lot of gap in the technical skills and all, it would be rather negative in that sense, and won't justify fruit for that. So people like us, when they come up with an expertise, which a customized solution for drinking water, it actually helps the government activity.
Right, and Dr. Anand, is trying to build a scalable for-profit venture getting in the way of you helping children become more healthy?
Yeah, that's why I think I said in the beginning, it's about putting it into the DNA of the organization. I think that some of the things we talk about in terms of what he mentioned, will the board have a separate meeting around impact that has been created, things like that are not, we can't take it for granted because different type of investors may get on at different times. It's about us putting it into the DNA of the organization, what we are doing. Now, whatever form the organization takes, if it continues to remain in pediatric primary health care, I'm sure we are creating some impact. So that by itself, because of the nature of the space we are in, the kind of strategy that we have built to develop and deliver programs is something that cannot be taken away from the company, right? We can change the business decision. I disagree when we say impact is only about the lower socioeconomic class. For example, is working on obesity in children in India, is it necessarily not impact? We are going to have great impact, but that means today obesity is largely in the middle and upper middle class, but it doesn't mean that if I work on obesity, I am not impact. So it's about building it into the DNA of the organization, and I think once that is done, things will take care by itself.
Great. So last question in the front here.
Yeah, to you, Aquasafi. Basically, there's a big awareness coming out today that RO almost removes all the good soils and the minerals which is needed for the body to build up immunity and bone strength. Now RO like TDS 10 and 15 is now heard of, with big companies doing that, as well as enriched mineral. So older days, your grandma and grandfather used to go and drink the revelent water, they didn't fall sick. Today, as because the immunity has become zero because of drinking RO water, past 10 years we are gone for a toss, our immunity is gone for a zero. So today doctors have checked it, lot of doctors, they say nothing, ill health has nothing to do with TDS. Can you answer this question? Because taking this for selling to the village doesn't connect, because RO itself is today debatable. Second thing, selling water in a village is not for profit with a purpose. Can you answer that?
Pavan, it seems like we've struck a chord here so could you give a really brief answer and then maybe you could address the technical points afterwards?
Yeah, so this is a question most often asked. So during the, our grandfather's time and all, so the, and before that, the water was not as polluted or the agriculture was not as intensive as today is, and the water which we get is contaminated most of the places. And so it needs some sort of treatment, whether it's a chemical treatment or a biological treatment. So where we are speaking about is the TDS level, that means there is some amount of chemical contamination that is there in water. And it's not that you provide people with factory level or distilled water. Even in the system like RO, you can blend the water and provide them and create something like it is like 100 to 200. So there is a system built in that. It's only about there's some of the private organizations, some bad apples creating a bad name for the whole sector itself. It's it's just the technology where they can just blend the water and provide the correct TDS levels in water.
Great. And thank you very much. So I'm very pleased that we have a question from a lady from the final question. So please.
Thank you.
We actually don't call it antisocial here. We call it the informal sector, as it's called in India. And in most of the places, whether you take Africa, India, anywhere, electronics is wealthy, it's a business, and it's a pretty mad business out there. And then the way you do it is defined by the fact that you've been doing it for many years, and suddenly you realize the way you're doing it is not right. So now you come up with a halo over your head and then say, boss, don't you stop doing this, you're the right guys to do it. I mean, that doesn't work, unfortunately. Now we have to kind of go down the path, and I actually wanted to do this at the end, but I just want to let people know here, all of us want to get into involve some recycling. We want it to be responsible, but we need to first believe in responsible recycling before we actually get to the next step. Now when we say responsible recycling, our intent, action, which means that you take less money from the next step, the kabadiwalas and everyone else, so that it actually lands up in a formal enterprise where it can be responsibly recycled. So if you want to wean people away from this anti-social or the informal sector, we have to first believe in responsible recycling. I mean, it goes for both of us. I mean, whether you take Roshan or myself.
Great. No, that's good. I think we're going to go over to Ron.
So before we close this session, I would like to ask Will, because Will was taking the privilege to ask questions to all. I would like to take this privilege to ask this question to Will, because he sees startups and entrepreneurs across the world. So can you list the three things, or all the panelists, if you could list the three things that these entrepreneurs should make sure, or they should consider while executing on the ground locally, that will take them globally? The three things.
Yeah, well, I'll start by one, and I see this in entrepreneurs everywhere that we work. And for me, it's mostly the United States and India, and with bulk in India, is if you want to be able to scale a business, you have to understand your fundamental unit economics. And it's remarkable how many entrepreneurs come to us with actually even functioning businesses that don't truly understand what it costs them to deliver a unit of product or service to their ultimate customer. And so if you want to scale locally, nationally, or globally, understanding deeply what your unit economics are and what drives them is key. That's number one. Number two is you have to be able to understand, is the product or service you're building truly one that has a global market? So there may be some businesses represented here that have unbelievably large global markets, and other ones that wouldn't necessarily fit very well globally because the infrastructure is different or whatever. So I think thinking very hard about the dynamics of the national, regional, global markets and seeing how your business fits into them is key. And the final one comes to the first thing that I look into every entrepreneur is, do you have a team that can scale? And that's true whether you're doing intensely local business, national or global. You have to have a team and the ability to show that you can build a team that can have that kind of scale and impact. And some teams have it and some don't. And some can get it and some can't. And so that's one thing that we're going to always look for is, does the leadership of a company show that they have the ability to build a team that can achieve truly national and ultimately global scale. So those are the three things that I come up with. Anybody want to add something?
So to the team that you're saying, a little bit of a nuance to it. It's just not the team that is working under you. It's also having one co-founder or somebody else who we call as a peer, who shares your goals and visions and also can help you bounce off ideas. And having 2 people or 3 people, I mean, I'm sure you know a lot of examples of Google and other places where there are multiple founders who have grown the business to a bigger scale. I think having that person who we call as your equal and who can help you bounce off the ideas actually help you build a better team.
I'm glad you brought that up, and just on our particular sample of 22 companies that we have in our portfolio, I'd say all but 3 of them have co-founders. So I think it's a super important thing for success. So, Shiva.
I think from my perspective, I think leadership is very important, though it's the team is definitely also a function of leadership. I think social enterprises are difficult. You're solving some really difficult problems, and there'll be a lot of failures. And sometimes it's not really a failure, but it'll take a lot of time to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So the leadership is very important. The management team and the founder or the co-founders should have the perseverance and the leadership in the face of failure, or in the face of where you are really stuck in the dark, to stand up and smile and say, come on guys, let's do one more round. So I think that kind of leadership is very important to make startups, especially social enterprises, work.
And in the spirit of having the last question from a lady from the audience, how about if the last answer comes from a lady on the panel? So, Zlata, do you have a comment on what it takes to, what you would think about it was required to scale globally, ultimately?
Our program possibly depends more on the local, having a local talent available, because as I said, we don't seek to replace the teacher in the classroom. So the teacher or the adult or the facilitator, whatever you would call, needs to be present for children to facilitate the learning, to encourage them, to give them a pat on the shoulder when they do well. So for us, getting that local team is very, very important. So though the products can be used anywhere in the world, having a local team really helps.
Great, thanks.
Great.